Welcome to the Powercat Podcast, the original K-State sports show. Here's your host, Tim Fitzgerald.
Welcome to another edition of the Powercat Podcast. I am Fitz with Gills, as we're going to talk about a little Kansas State basketball today. I know that's a sore subject with a lot of people, but Gills, we got some stuff to sort through, some questions from Wabash Station, and I know everyone's in a bad mood, Ryan. I know that. People are pissed. K-State basketball isn't playing well. The women are fading. There's no spring football right now. Baseball started pretty well, but now they're playing everywhere that's warm. Not here. Well, it is warm here. So
True.
Fans are grumpy.
Except for your basement during the game on Wednesday. I was freezing my butt off down there.
Cold. It was cold. People are grumpy, mega grumpy. It's hard to blame them. So today we turned on the Cats and Dogs studio cam. And after walking around the studio as we led up to the show, the dogs went to their spots. It's not very exciting. Dude's in the back, and Daphne is right here in this chair. As I point to it, that's her spot. We're going to leave that up just to make you happy, because nothing makes me happier than dogs and Ryan Gilbert. That was a compliment, Gills.
Thanks. I appreciate you.
There's not many of those for me, for you, so you better live it up. Kansas State loses. Everyone knows that, 80-76. If you don't know that, congratulations for tuning out. It's probably best for your mental health. Another shoddy performance. Max Jones was pretty good. The team as a whole wasn't. And I want to start here before we get to the questions, though. Gills, I was relieved Jerome Tang finally called out the players a little bit.
Yep.
And it's a no-win situation for a head coach. He has taken the blame every step of the way, when clearly he should have saying what he said last night. These guys have to be accountable for their play too. We're coming out here and we're trying to take the pressure off them, but then they're not executing when they go in the game. And you know what? I'm with him. And yet, whenever he does that, the first time he's done that all season, throwing your players under the bus, just the cliche comes rolling out. And he absolutely did not do that. If you think being held accountable is being thrown under the bus, I got news for you. It's the real damn world. Being held accountable is a great thing. And I have benefited from it many times. And Gills, what were your thoughts on his post-game comments? Not just about his team, but also basically begging the students to show up for Sunday's game with Colorado because, quote, I don't think we're not a very good team without you, or something like that. You know, like, we're no good without the students. And he laid it out there, but no lies were detected on my end.
Yeah, we'll see on Sunday if there's a sizable student section, and I don't necessarily anticipate Tang's words getting through to the students. And I'm not saying I agree or disagree for right or wrong, but when K-State wins, fans show up, and when they're losing, you see empty seats. And so, Tang is, I know he mentioned he goes to like for fraternities, sororities. He's always there when students ask him. So I get what he's coming from 100%, but I'm not holding my breath on seeing an uptick from what we saw against Arizona State. But yeah, in terms of, the comments about his players, like, absolutely, man, I would like to see that more from Tang. Now, not every single time you lose, you have to throw your players under the bus, but when the energy and effort isn't up to snuff, and, Jerome Tang mentions you need to be the team that either throws the first punch or goes punch for punch with your opponent, and you're not the team that has to just punch back, right? Kansas State, especially for a team that struggles on the road, needs to be the group that sets the tone early rather than adjusting and fighting back. Just be the team that throws the first punch.
Yeah. And that's what they did when they were on the winning streak. They were on the attack, and they were the aggressor on both ends of the floor, and now they're not. But we have some of that coming up here from the questions from Wabash Station. I think I've collected 5 here. Different temperatures on these. Some are coming in hot. Others are, a little more philosophical, but let's get to them right now. Our first one is from our buddy El Camino Cat, one of the great posters at Wabash Station. Which was the better team, this year's or Bruce's last year? Explain your selection. This is hard. I stared at this one and went, this year. No, Bruce's team. Not this year. And why this is a fair comparison to me is this Bruce's last year was when he plunged into the transfer portal and tried to make use of that. Was it for the good? Yeah, that team was better because of Mark Smith and others. I think I'm going to go with Bruce's last team because they had a better identity. I don't think they were the better team in terms of talent, but I do think they were the better team in terms of being a team. That makes sense?
I feel like if these two teams met right now, I would go this current team. But maybe the expectations and what we thought this team would be, right? This is 1,000,000% more disappointing just based off of the hype alone. And Bruce Weber was, kind of on his way out, right? And the year before that, Kansas State had won 9 games, right? And on his final year, it was like, okay, it was just kind of, people were not surprised to see a team miss the NCAA tournament. Whereas Jerome Tang, in his comments, he's outspoken about expecting to win, right? It's more frustrating for fans when there was so much that was hoped for this current team. So, I mean, I think this group of guys against Mark Smith and Ish Massoud and Marquise and Nigel Pack, all those guys, I would take this team to win. But just in terms of like the disappointment, man, 1,000,000%, this is far more disappointing.
Yeah, I agree with you. This is hard to explain. And, looking back at that team, though, combination of Mark Smith and Nigel Pack, and you had Marquise Noel on the team, who certainly hadn't blossomed into what he became under Jerome Tang, but there was real potential for that team, and we didn't really fully grasp it. Maybe we've changed our measurements here, Gills. Maybe we were over-optimistic with this group and under-optimistic with that group.
Right. That team did lose, I think, like 6 in a row to end out the year. Right. It was on the bubble for a little bit, like in February, and then just kind of tanked. And we'll see how this season ends. Maybe I can give you a better answer after we see how the last 3 regular season games go, and if anything happens in KC.
Kind of sounding familiar.
Yeah, because there's no fight, Fitz. There's no fight shown with that last Weber team. We'll see if this team has any fight.
I agree with you. KSU Man wants to know this. What does this team need going into next year to be successful? What additions to this team, what do we need to see if next year is going to be a little more productive?
Well, I know there's a couple questions that are kind of overarching with this theme, so I'll try to not get maybe too specific. But, obviously you want guys to come back because that's continuity. That means so much in college basketball, but you do have to do better in the portal. There's going to be at least a couple guys. Who knows how many newcomers will come in via the portal, but there's going to be some, and you just can't have misses. Now, I'm not saying anybody was necessarily a miss, but just have to get guys that you're going to be on the same page with from day one, right? Chor's not with the team. Doug McDaniel had his growing pains early on in this locker room. Buddy Rich, I know, was a high school prospect, but you need to, that should be the first box that you check is, are you a good fit for our team? And that doesn't mean that somebody's a bad person. They're not a good fit, right? It's just you have to see eye to eye with the staff. And if you don't, well, the next year's team is not going to be successful, like the question says, if you don't get guys like that.
I'm going to put it this way. First, I need a core group of players returning so that they have a shell of a program to introduce new players into. They haven't had that. That's really, for me, been the downfall here, is they had to reinvent their program every year. They're moving away from that. If they can get 6 guys to come back, and I'm about to sneeze and it's going to hurt because I have a pulled muscle in my back. It's going to be an interesting part of the podcast. You know what, Gills? It didn't hurt as much as it has been.
And everybody watch Dude here on the screen.
This is what Dude does when I sneeze. Every time. No matter where he's at in the house, if he hears me, he comes to check on me. Hi, buddy. It's a good boy. What was I even saying? You got to retain some players. I think Max Jones, getting him eligible for next year would be huge. I don't know where that's going in the court system. I know one judge ruled a player that played D2 is got an extra year. The NCAA has not gone along with that one because that's an NCAA institution. Unlike a junior college or whatever, it's not quite the same. But Max Jones would be a huge addition. He was the only guy that really looked fully invested in the game the other night. And that was just last night. Jeez. It showed. He's turned into a really, really solid player. This is a guy that's used to being an alpha. Wherever he's played before, he's been the guy. And now he's not the guy. He had to step up into that role a little bit last night. But I got to tell you what, he has done a great job of adjusting to being the guy who does a little bit of everything. And he does it really well. So that's a positive. I think the most important thing, though, thank you, dude. Now he's going to move the other end of the couch so you can't even see any dogs now. Barely see him. I think one of the things that is vital for this program, and I think Jerome Tang understands it now, is to recruit more than just players. His job, while he is such a person that wants to improve all around the players around him and as people and even fix some guys, that's not your job. Your job is to win basketball games and finding high character guys that want to come in and play and contribute and be part of a team and not make it about them. I think this team ran into that at the start of the year. Everyone was getting money. It's about me. And they had to grow into something, and they did briefly. So I just think they need to put the foundations down for a program that can succeed over the long term, because we haven't seen that.
I agree. I mean, I don't want to get too much into it because the next question, like I said, is kind of similar, but I think you want to bring in guys that make CJ Jones, Brendan Hazen, any of those guys returning. I want them to feel uncomfortable. I want them to feel like this guy is coming in and maybe stealing my minutes, right? Now, if Brendan Hazen or CJ Jones, if they come back next year, and these are just a couple of guys, these aren't the only two, but if they play 10 minutes a game, then fine. If they play 30 minutes a game, they have to earn it, right? Now, I'm not saying that they haven't earned their minutes this year, but with a roster that's really not as deep as we thought, right? I'm not sure how many teams around the Big 12 would happily take CJ or Brendan into their starting five. Now, Gasson, I think we cover Gasson. We know how much importance he has to a team, but my point is, go out and get guys in the portal and really have guys working for minutes, have depth. That's what's going to get you successful next year, right? And then, by all means, take a guy like Byfall, who's maybe a potential guy rather than the current. I get that, but top to bottom, man, this team, Moby, you got Moby and Castillo and the bench, right? And Rich played. I guess we don't have a question about that, but that was something Fitz, wasn't it? I wasn't expecting that at all. But just, more competition on your roster, right? K-State is not as deep as advertised. And you need to be deep, and you need to have guys fighting for minutes, competing for minutes.
Bringing up Caleb Rich, who, when he plays, he does a lot of electric things. He just does. He's just a guy that catches your eye, and he is a fan favorite. He's not a coaching staff favorite, which is really the litmus test here. And that gets back to my point I made earlier about bringing in guys that want to be part of a team and want to do all the things that you need to do between the start of the season and games. And it's not just about playing. It's not even just about practice and being ready to go. It's about doing all the things that are involved in that. And staying away from outside influences that might steer you wrong. I'm being very vague. But at the end of the day, the reason why McCaleb hadn't been playing, is what we're told, is he had indicated he was transferring. And so the coaches thought, well, let's just invest this time into the players that'll be here. I have no problem with that. What I do have a problem with is being so devout to that, you put your team at a disadvantage. McCaleb Rich could have helped this team against Arizona State. And Jerome Tang indicated the last 2 days at practice, something changed. That he was getting close. And then the last 2 days between Arizona State and UCF, it all changed. I don't know about that. I just think the reality is they needed him, and he played hard. Still didn't do everything right, but he played hard. If he could apply that kind of effort and focus to every game, to everything he does, he's going to be one hell of a basketball player. It's just not going to be at Kansas State. He's burnt through those options. I think if he had a come to Jesus moment and sat down, Jerome Tang said, "It's been all me. I want to come back. I screwed up." Jerome Tang would talk to him, but he's got a lot of stuff to prove that he can do right before he ever steps on a court. That's just my thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, like guys are getting paid now. I mean, they're not professional athletes, but that's where like you could be more critical. They're getting paid, right? Yeah. But the point, Michaela Bridge, Buddy Rich, even if you are leaving, like go to professional sports. There's hundreds, thousands of guys that know they're going to be gone. They're on the last year of their contract, right? I've mentioned this before. Ish Masood, he was transferring. I think it was like December. Everybody knew that Masood was going to be gone. But you have two options. You can, I'm not saying take the chore out and just leave, but just be done with it. Or you can lock in, put your head down and work. And obviously at the end of the year, maybe part ways and say, hey, good job, right? And so that's where I'm happy to see Buddy Rich on the floor. Now, I think Rich played well, but even if Rich didn't play good, it was still good to see him get those minutes. That shows that he's, even if he is out the door, man, that's still a good thing to see. And, Rich, he led the team in plus minus Fitz. I know that's not gospel, but man, that means something. That means a little something.
One of the things that he always does when he steps on the court is he plays hard. The kid plays hard. Doesn't do everything right, but playing hard will make up for some of that. Again, apply that to everything else you do in life and take care of business with the same enthusiasm as you do on the court. And he's going to be successful. Let me do some adjusting here, Gills. If the dogs want to be this lazy and not show up for work, we're getting them out of here. They're out. They're out of the podcast. Lazy dogs.
So my head is so big, I got to scoot my computer back.
I know. God, there go the ratings. From Call Me T22. How does K-State as a program get back to making the tournament on a mostly yearly basis? Excuse me, I'm struggling with allergies. As a once proud program, we're about to miss our sixth tournament in the last 10 years. Let me bring up Danger Cat because this is almost the same question. I don't know why I added them both. Why should I have any faith that we'll ever be consistent program again? We haven't strung together more than 2 solid seasons in a row since Frank Martin was here. Wow. I actually think he's right on that. So how does this program recover, Gills? I want to go back to what he said. Frank Martin's team had an identity. His program had an identity, not just his team. The teams adopted that identity. And Mitch Holtis named it the Dobermans. They were aggressive, mean on defense. But their offense didn't look much different than what we're seeing now. It really didn't. Played to the post, they'd come up, set the picks, and they'd roll out of that. They'd try to attack the rim. There wasn't a lot of structure there. It was more about playmaking. And when they had playmakers, they were really good. Eventually, that kind of petered out a little bit. But with Jacob Pullen and certainly Michael Beasley, this was a really good team. But they had an identity of who they were, what they wanted to recruit to, and what they were trying to accomplish. And I don't know that Bruce Weber ever did that. He put together some really good teams. He developed some really good players. He's a great coach, but he could never achieve the consistency you need. It was a roller coaster ride. I've said that over and over, and it became a very jarring one. It became difficult to stay on board. But I think the key here is Jerome Tang needs to decide, what is Kansas State basketball? What are we going to be? What's our identity? Do we reform that identity around the players every year, or do we recruit to an identity that we want to fulfill? I personally think that's the right answer. I personally think they need to decide, we're going to do this. Let's get the guys to do it. Instead, they go out and find guys and then try to decide how we're going to go about this. I don't think that's working, Gills. I think they need to decide, we're going to be the pressing team. We're going to be the defensive hounds. We're going to be the rebounding team. We're going to be the 3-point shooting team. We're going to play to an identity, because that's exactly what they did for 6 games. were really good defensively. They turned it into offense. They rebounded with a great deal of focus and aggression. They were just on the attack. And maybe that's a common theme we see here is when K-State programs become the team that gets attacked, it doesn't work well. When this program, like the Dobermans, goes on attack, it makes up for whatever shortcomings Kansas State basketball might have. Maybe don't recruit at the highest level. Maybe don't do this or this. Maybe not in a big market area where you get a lot of fans and the recruits want to come and flourish. If you're playing to an identity, you can close those gaps. I think Iowa State's done that earlier in the year, and now they've lost track of that a little bit. But find an identity, recruit to that identity, play to that identity, and become that identity. That's just my answer.
Yeah, man. I couldn't agree more. Frank Martin's teams were tough. They were tough. And Kansas State, over the last 2 games against Arizona State and UCF, have not been giving 110% effort, right? I'm not going to say it was egregious, but it absolutely wasn't great. And let alone the Utah trip, right? This team has lost 4 in a row. You got to be tough. You got to have that identity. And like I said earlier, in the portal, if you want to go to the high school route and get guys at that ranks, that is the first box that has to be checked. And then you can start evaluating actual skills or actual positives in their game. But if they're not a good dude, just in terms of their mental, physical toughness, right? They don't want to battle. They don't want to embrace those challenges. Then so like Bruce Weber's problem was Marcus Foster and losing the locker room, right? And then again, Cartier-Jada, not to blame him, but he lost locker rooms, right?
Yep.
But when things were going well, you knew how Bruce Weber's teams were going to play, a little slower, a little defensive. You knew what you were getting when they were going well. But now with Kansas State, and in Drum Tang's defense, he mentions that I guess the rules, quote unquote, have changed at kind of every year he's been in Manhattan. What you can and can't do, and who's going to be back, and the portal and eligibility, right? So I get that, but if you're just going out this year, we're going to go grab the highest NIL guys we can get. And now this year we're going to go out and get, you know what I'm getting at? It's just kind of changed every year, and you have to stick to one thing, like you said. So I couldn't agree more. Have that identity. And you look at Baylor, I'm pretty sure Jerome Tang would like to follow kind of what Scott Drew has consistently built. He's been Scott Drew and Jerome Tang, to Drew's credit, was very consistent for 19 years at Baylor. Once they got the ball rolling, I don't have it pulled up in front of me, but more often than not, Baylor was in the NCAA tournament. So getting back to that, and having a consistent group of players that are back year in and year out, and you only have to plug in rather than plug in pieces rather than make over your whole roster is going to get you more continuity and hopefully win you more games and get you back to NCAA tournament.
Very good. I agree with all that. You need to figure out what you want to do and find the dudes to do it. I know that sounds simplistic. It's not easy to do, particularly when you're dealing with the transfer portal. Guys are in the portal for a reason. It might be their coach got fired, which means your team wasn't very good. Might mean you weren't playing very much and feel like you're better. Maybe you're not. Maybe you had a bad attitude and the coach wanted you gone. You just didn't fit the system and he wanted you gone. Well, it's never good when a coach wants you gone. So it's hard to sift through the portal and find the alpha that will do everything right. That makes sense?
Yeah.
I would say Doug McDaniel's an alpha. That's the whole sentence there. I mean, Doug's gotten so much better about how he does things, how he goes about his business. But earlier in the year, we heard he wasn't doing that. That's why he wasn't starting. And so getting him closer to that is important. And if he returns, Doug needs to just be the guy that does everything right for a year and see where that takes him in his career. I think that would be significant for him and Kansas State basketball.
Yeah.
Final question.
Quick, Fitz.
Yeah, go ahead.
We're rushing
No,
through.
We're fine.
Brendan Hazen was, is from Texas, right? this staff, I think it was Urick and Tang both recruited him before he went to Villanova. Doug McDaniel out from DC, like they've got to St. Paul, that AAU, so it's not like, and not like Max Jones, like some of these guys, I don't really think there was any sort of previous relationship Like they had to just look at him in the portal and kind of get to know you right then and there. But some of these guys they've known for a long time, right? And so that's also something that you have to maybe sort of reevaluate, I guess, right? Like Doug McDaniel had his issues at Michigan, undeniable, not good stuff that came out of that. And now, again, like you said with Jerome Tang, the job, I'm sure Jerome Tang loves to help and fix players, right? But that is not number one on your to-do list as a coach. Mike Tomlin has a quote, the job is playing the game, but the business is winning, I think is how he says it. Like you can do all those stuff after winning, but winning comes first. And so, there's just not, it's frustrating when, these are, and, I'm not trying to, Brendan Hasen's been great by all accounts, right? But overall, it's not just, they don't get a pass for some of these guys that when they miss on the personality or things don't click because they've known some of these guys for a long time, Fitz.
Yeah, I agree with all that. You know what you call a coach who has a roster full of 4.0 students that do everything right on and off the court and win 1/3 of their games? You call them unemployed. I mean, that's just the reality of the business. And forming young men or young women in many cases into better adults is a big part of that. But I would encourage coaches not to take on too many projects because that becomes a distraction from the actual project you're involved in, building a basketball program and winning basketball games. Here we go. Last one from Wrestling 1982. Can you give me some hope for next year? Nope. That's the podcast. I kind of answered this earlier a little bit, but I'm just going to say this. People are not going to be happy about next year, Gills. They're just not. Because I've used this over and over, but it seemed like the portal and going out and finding great players in the portal and building a roster that way was the cheat code. And it turned out to be not true at all. Some programs have been able to do that. Hell, K-State did it with great success in the first year, but really the key was a returning player, Marquise Noel, was the glue. So now that they're kind of midstream on this failed get everyone out of the portal concept, they want to shift back to kind of having a framework of a program, of a roster. And at 15 scholarships, which they're going up to next year, they can kind of have more projects in terms of player development on the roster. They're going to be doing that. But because of the reality of that, they may be having 6 players come back, maybe it's 4. They're just going to have to be in the transfer portal again. Right? They can't build a roster out of the players they have returning and a bunch of freshmen. That'd be horrific. So they're going to need to have a transition class here that helps bring in players while they bring in some young guys that can be developed and just start that process, because it's a multi-year process to get you where you want to be. Now, maybe just recruiting better people, better citizens, players that are more interested in teamwork. I know this team, Drum Tank, keeps saying they bonded. They're really close. They're good guys, but they're not. I just don't sense the full-on camaraderie you need when the team's not playing well. Gills, you've noticed it. It fades. It goes away. There's people not jumping up on the bench with a made shot. It's that energy that helps feed them. So I think next year, if we all adjust our eyesight to be about getting a strong foundation to the program and to the roster and being successful, I think this team can win games. Probably not at the rate some of you would want, but I do think this team could be eligible in contention for the NCAA tournament. You just got to find that thing that Bill Snyder always sought, never found enough of: consistency. And they have found consistency in their inconsistency. But that makes Coach happy.
When the arrow is pointed up, it's very consistent. When the arrow is pointed down, it's very consistent as well. But I'll bring up the question here real quick. Just said hope, right?
Yeah.
You want hope for next year. I'll take a little bit of a different avenue or approach to this than what you said, Fitz. Jerome Tang is, in terms of head coaching years, right? He's relatively young. He's hip, he's cool. He knows how to say the right things. I think he knows how to adapt. And you look at Jareem and Perry and Uric, his 3 lead assistants, right? Like they're young, they're hip, they're cool. Jareem is the cool guy with the towel on the
Social
bench,
media.
right? He's waving it up, right? And then you go down the line, Carpenter and A-Dub, like Frank, all these guys. Marco, I guess Marco's maybe a little older. Marco, if you're watching this, but it's a young staff that I think can adapt. And if you want hope for next year, you're looking at a group of guys led by Tang that I think are going to embrace the way that you have to go about things now. And I don't want to, throw dirt on Bill Self, but right now in the current landscape of college basketball, there's an argument to be made that you'd feel more comfortable with Jerome Tang in the future of your program compared to Bill Self, who's struggling right now, but is having to do things a different way. Is there a correlation there? That's an argument to be made for a different day, but that would give you hope as a fan that you've got full faith in Jerome Tang, and his staff have flaws, but I think one of their greatest strengths is being able to adapt and change in this new era of college basketball.
I agree with all that. It's been really muddy out. This talking about Bill Self made me think of this. It's been really muddy out. I mean, all the snow melted. The dogs have been coming and going, and my carpet looks horrible. I don't know why that reminded me of Bill Self. I like that answer, actually. Yeah, this is of note, though. KU is struggling. This is not the same. They're on the top 25 for the first time since they had a T-Rex on the roster. That's how long ago it was. The guy was a horrible passer, just short-armed everything. And Baylor's struggling. Baylor's slipping towards the bubble right now. So some of the more established programs in this conference are beginning to run into some barriers as the game hits this evolution. And there's adjustments to be made for a lot of programs. This is not solely a K-State issue. It is going on all across college basketball. There's a great deal of chance right now with how your team's going to be based on how the portal pieces fit together. And you need to, I think, limit that amount of chance by having a good structure to your program around which you can pour in the portal players and give them something to play to, an identity to play to. Back to that. So, any final thoughts there, Gills?
Oh man, I mean it's tough to find not positives, but I mean we're trying. We're trying to give you hope, but the frustration. I mean, it's understandable, warranted. 100%.
One of the things that frustrates people about us sometimes is we're too honest. I mean, sometimes we'll lay it down. We'll say, it's bad, but we also do want to try to stay positive. I think all of us in the K-State media try to find the positive side to things as much as possible to offer hope. And let's be blunt here. Just telling people, I'm sorry, there's no hope is bad for business.
Yep.
And plus that's not true. There's always hope. Trust me, I know there's always hope. And you have to fight through the bad times to get to better times. And hopefully K-State can get on track to do that. Maybe they're not done with better times this season. I think they are. But you string together 3 wins here at the end of the season. Yeah, I said it out loud, Gills. I apologize. You're now over 500. You're losing Kansas City. You'll be at 500. You could play some form of postseason if there's even value in that. K-State got absolutely no value out of the NIT last year. They didn't want to be there. They didn't play well. The coaches were knowing that they had to get their portal recruiting going, which starts as I said today on the Daily Delivery, starts at the Monday after the first week of the NCAA tournament. Why it's there, I don't know, but there it is. So leading up to the Sweet 16, the portal's open, and that's an important time for Kansas State. And if they're playing in the second round of the NIT or the third round, they might be missing out on some of that.
Yeah, and Fitz, even when the portal isn't open, and not that K-State or anybody's tampering, right? But you people know who's leaving and going.
You're making calls.
Yeah, right.
You're making calls to your buddies.
Yeah.
Who you guys? What's going on? Because I know people called Jerome Tang and said, "Hey, we're looking at this kid on your program." All the coaches do this. Well, what do you got to say? And the coaches are honest. And then they just go ahead and take the player, no matter what the other coach said. That's pretty much how it works, because they're all smarter than everyone else. Every coach in the country is smarter than every other coach. And here's the thing, Gills. Only one's right. That's it for the podcast. I like to end on a deep thought. And plus, Daphne farted. So we need to probably get out of this so I don't die. We appreciate you watching the Powercat Podcast. We pop in on occasion now, not as structured this time of year. We do them when we can. Gills will be back tomorrow at some point with Clint Stewart to tape the Friday walkthrough. That'll either appear Friday or Saturday. I don't care. The game's Sunday, Gills. The game is Sunday, 3 p.m. against Colorado Buffaloes. The worst team in the Big 12. Granted, they've won 2 games as of late to get to 2-15 in the conference. If K-State doesn't win this game at home, I'm throwing Ryan Gilbert off the bridge.
This has been a GoPowerCat.com and Spirit Street production. Please support this show by subscribing to this YouTube channel or follow us on your favorite podcast platform.